What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Professor Bourbon Podcast. And where I usually would say, welcome back to the library, we got a very special episode today. We are actually doing it live from Sonoya Bridal Company, and we have Professor Bourbon himself in town, down here in the South. How are you doing today, Professor Bourbon?
Doing fantastic. It's great to be here on New Year's Eve, hanging around watching a little football and enjoying the town of Sonoya on a beautiful day. It's almost 70 degrees and the sun is out and there's not a cloud in the sky. And we have a surprise today that I'm pretty excited about.
We do have a little surprise today. So we were sitting here at the bridal shop and we were about to open up some bourbon, and we were debating to ourselves, why don't we do a little episode of the podcast while we're here? We started talking about it, and we realized we have something very special here that Professor Bourbon has recently acquired. So I'll let you take it over. What is special about this bottle, and what is it?
All right, so the bottle itself, I don't know, is all that special. It is a really nice bottle. I'm very happy to have it, and thanks to Mr. Proof from Nashville for getting this one for us. But this turns out to be my 500th bottle in my collection. 500 bottles in the collection. I have to say we've gone over that a little bit. Hashtag can't stop spending money at Crooks. Market in Sonoya, Georgia. And a shout out to Eric who has been fantastic to us. And we had a lot of really nice conversation with the other day that led to me buying a few more bottles. So I'm up over 500. But my 500th bottle turns out to be this guy. Four Roses, limited, the 2022 limited edition small batch. We're pretty excited about this. This is 109 proof. It is made up of a 20-year-old bourbon from the OBSV recipe. We'll talk about what those letters mean in a minute. 15-year-old from the OESK, 14-year-old from OESF, and a 14-year-old from OESV. So we'll talk about those and what those things mean in a second. And so that means it's been aged a minimum of 14 years. So I figured let's open this and pour this on there on the line and online, and we'll have a little sip and we'll give you our thoughts. So,
I love it. It's bottle, what was it? Bottle 31 out of
Bottle 31 out of 15,600.
That's pretty cool. That's a low number.
That's a low number.
For that big of a release. Have you ever had one of these limited editions before?
No, I've had the small batch, but not the limited edition, and I have obviously a few, I think 6 or 8 of their single barrels. And I got, the last time I was in Claremont, in between Jim Beam and Bardstown, I stopped into their bottling facility and picked up a couple of single barrels that were chosen by their master distiller, which are really
nice.
Good.
I think Elliot something or other.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's open this one up. We'll pop it, pour it, and we'll give you our first thoughts on it.
I'm excited for this one. Bottle number 500. That was nice.
It was a beautiful sound.
That was nice. What's that called? ASMR?
I think that's ASMR. That's a beautiful... Oh, man, the nose on this is just beautiful before we even stick our nose into it. And in honor of Freddie, we're going to leave the top off.
All right. Had to walk across the room to get my pour. But definitely looking forward to this one. I always see this one on allocated releases and just never had a chance to get one at a decent MSRP. So I'm glad that Professor Bourbon pulled the trigger on this one.
I do smell the little bit of oak. They tell me I'm supposed to smell some peach jam.
Okay.
I maybe I get that a little bit, and some magnolia blossoms, but I can't remember what magnolia blossoms are like right now because we got to wait another couple of months for that. But we did have a big magnolia tree in our backyard when my kids were little, and the class used to climb that tree like it was her job.
The magnolia tree?
Yeah, and I believe she or her brother, I think her brother got stuck once, and she had to go up and get him. But I could be wrong. I could have that backwards, but it wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me at all either. No, that's actually a really good pour, even from right off the crack.
From the rip?
Yeah, that's not too bad at all. What'd you say, 103 proof?
109 proof, I believe, is what it is. Yeah, 109. And this is the 2022 edition. And I think we have a line on the 2024 edition, don't we?
We do, yes. So I think Mr. Proof actually recently got you that bottle. It might be in the mail as we speak right now. But he's been doing a great job for us up in Nashville. They obviously see a completely different release than we see down here. So it's nice having somebody that is eyes and ears in another city that, they may get a ton of one product that we don't see and vice versa. And you're able to kind of trade some people with that. These Four Roses, though, I know you were explaining the different letters and people that, chase these down. I know sometimes in the groups, they're specifically looking for like that 4-letter combination. And some of them people will just trash talk and be like, oh, that one's garbage. You don't want that one. You want the OBSV or OBEQ. So can you explain what that little system that Four Roses has is?
Yeah, and Four Roses also is kind of weird too because of if you tour their place and talk to the people there, they really think are 100% sure that the position in the rick house matters, and they tell you right down to the tier the barrel was in when they do single barrels, which corner of the rick house it is. Was this in? In fact, if you look at their barrels, they'll be marked in a way that you can tell this one came from the southeast corner of rick house number 10, tier number 2. And so they get that because most of their stuff is single barrels. So the idea here is with the letters, like we said, this one was, I don't want to get it wrong, was 20-year-old of OBSV, a 15-year OESK, and 2 14-year-olds, an OESF and an OESV. So what those letters mean, and the first one seems like the most mysterious, but notice the first one, every single one of their bourbons starts with O. And all that means is the O means that it was distilled at the Four Roses Distillery in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. So you're like, okay, why O if it's distilled at Four Roses and it's in Lawrenceburg? And the reason is that's the site of the Old Prentice Distillery. So the O stands for Old Prentice Distillery. So the reason for the O, and it's the same on every bottle, it's the same thing. The next letter is either the next letter has twice as much variation as the first one. It's got two. Got two. It is either an O or a B either a B or an E, as you saw here in a second. So the B is, those are both for their mash bills. They have a high rye mash bill and a lower rye mash bill. So their high rye mash bill has 60% corn and 35% rye, and then the rest is malted barley. And then the E is 75% corn and 20% rye. So the things that are B are going to be a little bit more spicy. The things that are E are going to be a little bit more smooth because they're going to be a little more corn relative to the.
Ooh, somebody rodding up the street.
Somebody wants some bourbon. He's off to Crooks.
Off to
Crooks in a hurry.
Something just dropped.
So the B and the E are from their mash bills, and then the S. And you'll notice in all of those flavors, the S was next, and the S never changes either. So the O and the S never change. The O is for the Old Prentice Distillery, and the S means straight. It just stands for straight. So that just means all of their bourbon is straight bourbon whiskey, which we know means it has to be barreled and aged for at least 2 years to be straight. But again, you can see this is 20. Well, the interesting thing is the age statement is not listed on this bottle at all. I had to actually go to their website to look it up, and I'm surprised that the age statement was not on there. And then the last letters are for their yeast strains. And they basically have 5 yeast strains. So they claim they can make, therefore, 10 different distinct bourbons, and then you throw it into their rick houses and the floor and the corner and all that. But they can make 10 distinct recipes.
Right.
So there are 5 letters for the yeast: the V, K, O, Q, and F.
And then you have the 2 variations of the second, which was the mash bill recipe,
Right.
correct?
So if you go 2 variations there, where they can be, they can either be E or B, and then 5 yeast strains from each one of those, so we get 10 total.
But they also have on the front of the bottle, and I know what a lot of people are searching for, not only is like the recipe with the OBSV or whatever it is, but like you were saying earlier, they have it where you can specifically see what level of the rickhouse it was, what rickhouse it was, which direction in the rickhouse it was facing, and that's what that other part of the label is, right?
Yeah, and on their single barrels, you'll see things like NN, NW, and then there'll be a number. And the last time I was there, the guy in the gift shop explained to me how to translate that, and I've long since forgotten.
Same.
Because I'd watched it, and it's like I was fairly new to all of this, and it was
Right.
holy crap, how can anybody ever remember all of this kind of stuff? And so maybe at some point in the future we'll break out a single barrel, which I don't have a single barrel bottle here, and we'll
Right.
decode the. And I think what they've done this year, I've seen in their recent ones, is there's a bunch of single barrels that you buy that are sort of nondescript, and they don't give you the mash bill, they don't give you the letters.
Okay.
And I think there's been a concerted effort, at least from what I've seen in the few liquor stores where I've seen it, is to actually write out the 4-letter code on the bottles now. So you can, so I guess the next Pokemon we got to chase down is to make sure we have all 10 recipes, and then we'll have to do a 10 recipe flight.
Here we
so
go
we're
again.
so we're gonna have to go in and
Here we go again.
we're gonna have to look at the card catalog and see which recipes we have. I think I've been pretty good about marking down which ones we have, but if not, we'll go back through those, and some of them you don't know, and I might be able to decipher them. But
Right. And it's kind of interesting, I think, how Four Roses is almost the exact opposite of Maker's Mark in a certain way. Whereas Maker's Mark rotates their barrels, everything they want a consistent flavor where you kind of can't tell where it came from. Whereas Four Roses, it's so specific to like exactly where that barrel was in the rickhouse and what the flavor profile is going to be from that specific spot. Whereas kind of the exact opposite would be Maker's Mark being like, we want everything to be a consistent taste, right?
And rotate through the barrels, so that's all. And
Right.
And the amazing thing about Maker's Marks, I think we've said this before, is that when white liquor was beating brown liquor 50 years ago, Maker's Mark put out an ad campaign in magazines and stuff that said Maker's Mark tastes expensive because it is.
Right.
And it and Blanton's were part of what kind of kept bourbon going, especially in the Japanese market with the Blanton single barrel. And then so Maker's, and it's funny, is it's not, again, it's a really good bottle at a relatively low price nobody ever thinks about. But almost every time we've blinded it, and we've said this before, we put it in a blind with something, it never finishes last,
Never.
and
Nope.
I don't think it ever finishes third out of 4.
I agree.
And so it's Maker's is pretty. I mean, it's hard to beat.
It's solid.
It's really hard to beat.
But since we're here on the 500th bottle episode, I figure I kind of rattle off some questions of you on this journey that you've been on collecting bourbons and just kind of get a little bit of backstory on some of this. So just to start it off real simple, what was the very first bottle you got that kind of started this whole thing?
Oh, it's crazy. I think my first bottle was, I know what it was, but I'm trying to remember the year. And I want to guess 16 or 17. Something in there. And so I remember we were visiting somewhere and somebody broke out a Dark Hollow aged in a bourbon barrel. It was a porter or stout aged in a bourbon barrel from Blue Ridge Brewery, I think it was. I was like, man, I really like this. I wondered if I like bourbon. So I don't know nothing from bourbon, and I go, okay, let me. And of course, I'm a kind of a tech weenie, so I figure let me get on the ABC website, see if they got like a list of stuff they have. And I look down at the list, and I see this thing called Blanton's. I'm like, okay, I kind of heard of Blanton's. I don't really know. So I wander into the store and, hey, how you doing? Were you looking for anything? I said, well, the website said you had a bottle of Blanton's, and I just wondering if you did. And the guy's like, I think we do. Hang on a minute. I go, I didn't see it on the shelf. And he's like, well, wait a minute. He goes in the back room, pulls me out a bottle of Blanton's. So the first bottle of bourbon I ever bought was a bottle of Blanton's at MSRP in the Virginia ABC in Farmville for whatever the retail was at the time.
$55 or something?
Something silly.
What year was that? You said 16 or 17?
16 or 17, I think. I'm not. That sounds about right.
Well before the boom, though.
Well, kind of
right at the beginning.
At the beginning, before the inflection point of the boom, right? Like right at the sort of, because the boom is variously dated from 2012 to 2014 to start of it. So it's early on. It's before, at least in Virginia, they're allocating stuff and hiding it and having lotteries. And I mean, there's no, obviously I walked in and bought a bottle of Blanton's off the shelf, and the same thing was true. I was talking to the manager before about some other stuff a couple weeks ago, and he said, the stuff, Pappy would come in and sit on the shelf for a month.
They put it with a special. They'd like pair it with something. It's like, if you buy this, if you'll buy the Pappy with it, we'll give you 20% off or whatever. And hindsight 2020, if you could go back about 15 years and just stack up.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I mean, that's with a lot of things too. I could go back and buy Bitcoin for a penny a piece and be a billionaire right now. So it's easy to say that. But if Blanton's was your first bottle, do you have a bottle that stands out as your most memorable bottle, not being that first one? Because I assume that one's very memorable just because you're always going to remember your first one. But is there any other one that kind of stands out?
Oh, and it's funny, too. That one's empty. It's
the one that
I think I've only emptied ever 2 bottles ever.
Well, with 500 in the collection, it's kind of hard.
That one is empty. The most memorable.
That's a pretty weighted question, I know.
That is a kind of weighted question. I mean, maybe the one that the most memorable would be when you came up and gave me a bottle of Blanton's when you wanted to propose to the class.
That's right.
And so I remember that one on Main Street in Farmville, on the corner in front of at the time the Longwood bookstore.
Yep.
And at the corner of 3rd and Main. And I do remember that one.
No, I didn't give it to him until he had given me permission to ask. I had kept it in the car, and so once we'd had the conversation at dinner, and he had given me his blessing to ask Angie to marry me, then I went out to the car and gave him the Blantons. If he had said no, that was going to be my drink my problems away that night. I was going to open it for myself and just drink my sorrows away.
That's hilarious.
But I appreciate you saying that. That's a special bottle for me as well.
I don't think I don't know that I've opened that one yet. I think it's still sitting in the back with the Blantons, and I have, speaking of Blantons, since just very recently got all the letters. I think missed you by a couple of weeks. You got all the letters, and then we both have all the letters.
Just beat you by that. Like maybe by 2 weeks, I got my last letter just before you, I think.
Yeah, and I'm trying to decide whether we want to just pull out all the corks and mount them on the stave, or wait till we drink them all.
That's a lot. You have 500 bottles to choose from. To drink through 8 full bottles of Blanton's is going to take you. I mean, we'd have to make it a goal or a mission.
Or maybe I just buy a bunch of stoppers, stick them in there, and they'll be Blanton's bottles with no horses on top.
That's true.
I mean, put them on the stage.
Yeah, no one's going to give you crap about that at all when they come over.
But it looks kind of cool because they're all in They're in the Blanton's order on the shelf on there, and that's the only thing on the shelf in the library. So nice. I can at least point that out.
Is there any bottle that you've regretted opening or not opening thus far? I know that you're a big proponent of, I want to open everything I get. Is there anything that you wish you have already opened, or is there anything that you've opened that you're like, maybe I should have saved that for something?
I don't know if there's anything that I think because if there's something I want to save, oh man, this just got really caramely and sweet, and I go with kind of creme, almost kind of creme brulee. The finish is nice too.
I can see
really
that. A little
sweet, a little honey. That's what it is. A little bit of honey.
I almost got a little bit of that sweet cherry too. Not like a bitter cherry, like a sweet cherry. But yeah, sorry. Any bottles that you've ever? Because I know
sorry about that. That's why we don't do tasting videos, because we'd spend all day going. and then those are harder to edit because then you got to wait for us to actually say something instead of going.
What's that? What is that? Butterscotch?
Is that, no, I think that's. Or give a shout out to Trenton on SLB Basement Bourbon. he'll say things like, "Have you ever been outside and wondered what it would taste like in the snow when the salt truck goes by and puts salt on the road and then you lick it? That's what that tastes like." He has some of the craziest. I love his tasting notes because they're some of the craziest tasting notes I've ever heard.
So none that you regret so far, either.
No,
not
no.
Or
I mean, I'm
either
really
direction.
waiting on the old fits that you guys opened the bridal shop, and really proud of you in the bridal shop, and it's doing really well, and that's why we're sitting here. And you guys gave me a bottle of Old Fitz decanter that I'm waiting on opening. No, I don't. And I have a couple other things. I guess what I wish I'd opened by now is when I bought the Beam Generations, that bottle I bought at the distillery last March. And so there's a lot of bottles that are sitting there that I really want to open. I got, the whole Little Book series, and that's going to be hard because I have 8. The only one I'm missing right now is the one that started it, and then there's a Little Book, I'm trying to remember what it is. It's almost impossible to find, not the Infinite, because that's the Booker's, but
The Reserves, is that the one you're thinking of?
that's Booker's Reserve.
Oh, okay.
I do have the Little Book is the Infinite, and I
Okay.
have that Little Book, and it's in a really cool box. And I don't know there's anything. I'd like to start getting all of those open. The Little Books, and now I'm probably at too many bottles that aren't open that really need to get open, and I just. It's tough. I don't like to open them by myself. I prefer to open them with somebody else.
I'm the same way, and I hate that you're 8 hours away because we'd be opening bottles nightly, obviously.
Yeah, then we'd probably increase the size of the collection by 300 a year, and that'd be bad.
Oh no, let's not do that.
That'd be bad. No, we're running out of space. We're gonna have to.
We're gonna have to blow out a wall,
or we're gonna have to, have a basement cellar where we put stuff and then kind of bring it up and rotate it like a curated library.
There's options. We can have that back inventory that stays in the basement. We just keep restocking up front. So now that your collection has basically filled your library, do you have any kind of like stipulations of what makes the cut of what you're hunting for, or is there anything that like, I guess you could say like, how can you decide what you want to add to your collection? Is it listening to podcasts? Is it kind of looking at people's reviews? What?
Yeah, part of it's podcast. Part of it is like, some of it is impulse, silliness. Like yesterday, we missed out on a bottle of Barrel 33. We could have bought. We had it in our hand and said, I don't know if I want to pay, $200 for a bottle of Canadian, 33-year-old Canadian hazmat. It was like 140 proof or something. And then we came back to the bridal shop and sat here for a while and said, it's not every day you get to buy. There's only 350 bottles of this. And it's not every day you're in the middle of nowhere, Georgia, that you get to buy a 33-year-old bottle of anything for $200. I was like, all right, let's go back down there. So we jump in Poppy, the golf cart. We drive down there, and
30
the
minutes
universe
too late.
was telling us, nah, you didn't really need to buy that. So
It's just waiting for us to buy something else as well.
yeah, a lot of it is just listening to. I mean, I think a lot of the podcasts, I know which guys I like and which one. The YouTube channels, more YouTube. I should listen to more podcasts, but I do a lot of YouTube channels, short stuff that, when you watch like Matt Porter and ADHD Whiskey and the Bourbon Junkies and It's Bourbon Night and SLB Bar, and they all are drinking stuff and they're all saying the same thing. I start to think, oh, maybe that's pretty good. And so far, I mean, that hasn't been wrong. Their palates have all. And then I listen, like you talk to Eric down here, and you listen and talk to other people, and it's like a lot of it is chasing expressions that are new, like these 2022, and the Bookers are always going to be. Anytime a Booker's comes out, and it was really funny. The 2024-04 came out, and people were like, "Oh, this is awful." I read a bunch of stuff about it being awful. And I was like, I don't understand why this is awful. In fact, the lady at the liquor store I was talking to the other day, and she's like, yeah, I heard this one's awful, because she knows I don't pester them when I go in. I just talk to them, and she's like, well, stuff about this. What do I tell somebody about this bourbon? What do I tell them about this bourbon? I said, well, I really like that 2404. She goes, it's been sitting there. Nobody's touching it. And she said, somebody said it was really bad. And I said, yeah, I've read that, but I don't get it. I think it's really good. And I tried it again. It was really good. Lo and behold, Fred Minnick had it top 20, top 10 maybe we saw in the Ascot Awards or his list, the top 100 for the year. So, I mean, I don't know. I think people get a little disappointed in the Bookers. The price has gone up a lot. You're looking at over $100 for a bottle that's only 7 or 8 years old. But I mean, it's not just any bottle. It's put together by some of the best palates in the business, and I haven't been disappointed in any of the Little Book or Bookers that I've had so far. I mean, there's some I like better than others, but I've not been disappointed in any of those. So,
and as you cross like allocated bottles off the list, I know it's harder to kind of decide what to buy, because obviously when you're hunting for the unicorns and the allocated bottles, it's whenever one becomes available, it's like, yeah, of course I'm going to take it if it's close to MSRP or a good deal. But I feel like it's kind of hard to get into the weeds of bourbon and get into those smaller distilleries and actually have the patience to try some of those, because it's so easy to just get sucked into the Heaven Hill, Buffalo Trace, because they're the standard, that they're not going to put out a bad product. But I wish I had the patience to walk into a store and just buy a random bourbon. I feel like you do that sometimes.
Yeah, I really like the kind of craft distillery stuff. The 1840 at Sandy River Distillery in Farmville, and it's actually over in Rice, Virginia. I really like their stuff a lot. And I mean, right now they're sourcing it. I think he's getting ready to bottle his own stuff soon. And I don't mind that stuff. There's a lot of really good stuff, and I listen to that. It's like the guys that are in Indiana are going to get different things than we are, and I don't mind going into a small distillery and trying stuff. I mean, that's where we get a lot of the Lux Row stuff. I think Lux Row, I mean, all of their expressions are different enough. They're really good, and to be honest with you, I've never, I don't know that I've had a bad Buffalo Trace thing. I mean, even if we're talking ancient age and ancient age, they're not great, but they're not awful. All of their benchmark stuff is pretty good. I mean, but it's one of those things where I'm contrarian enough that I'm like, yeah, okay, Pappy, I can get a Pappy for $300. I don't know that it's. But there are some of them, like if I see a Stag Junior or something like that, I'll definitely get it. And we have some other stuff that's there. And I've discovered that I really like Willet, a lot of the Willet stuff and Heaven Hill stuff. But then I circled around and I went after those Four Roses, all those little single barrels. I was like, holy crap, I got to start drinking that. And I went back to Anita's Choice out of Burnt Chimney Distillery in Bluffton, South Carolina. We got a bottle of that when we were on I think we were at Tybee Island on vacation. I found that, and I opened it again. It's a 6 grain, and I think it has rice. I think it's Carolina rice. I forget the name of it. It's really good rice, by the way. I've had it a couple times. Rice is a dish. And then some oats or something. And I was surprised. I hadn't had that in a while, and it was really, really good. So I don't mind the little distilleries.
Taking a flyer on a little guy.
Yeah, why not? I mean, they're trying to make this stuff go right. So
now, do you have a white whale right now as far as the allocated bottles go? I think I know what the answer to this is, so I might make you go to a second answer, but I'm pretty sure I know what answer number 1 is. But I'm curious, do you have one right now that's like...
Answer number 1. You probably know better than I do what answer number 1 is.
So I was going to assume, if you want me to tell you what I thought you would say, the Russell's 15.
Yeah, yeah. Russell's
just because
15.
Everyone's rated it almost number 1 this year, if not in their top 3, almost across the board. Everyone's put it in their top 3.
Yeah, and for me, I would kind of think of a good birthday bourbon or one of the Old Forester 117 series, something like the Old Forester stuff. I really like a lot, and the cool thing, again, is I've never been disappointed in Bardstown and going into their Louisville store and picking up their, I forget what it's called, the Piglet or Pig. It was really, really, really good. But yeah, I guess the thing that I've never ever even seen in the wild, I think maybe one time was a birthday bourbon, Old Forester birthday, or a Parker Heritage 18,
Yeah, or the double barrel, baby.
Yeah. Those are probably... And I would open them. I mean, I and Preservation Farm there in Bardstown has a lot of really good stuff too, but it's relatively straightforward to get at their place. That's got some really good things. So,
And I have to give you some credit because you really don't go chasing bottles down like a lot of people do. You don't go stand in line all night. You don't sit there and barter and trade bottles and do all this stuff to get it. You kind of just naturally wait until you have the opportunity to buy stuff. And then in the meantime, you find other really good stuff that you like that you can just find on the shelf. So I have to give you a little bit of credit for that, because to have the collection you have without just chasing everything really hard is also impressive.
Yeah, and I also am not going to buy, like, I don't need, the only reason I own 7 bottles of Blanton's is so I could have the letters. Right. And we just got lucky. We're going to open one up here maybe later today, and we'll put a little blurb on the TikTok, but we got a nice, speaking of Blanton's, we got ran into a Blanton's Gold. Got lucky, got a Blanton's Gold at a really good price. I mean, I don't think we just touched $200 for it, I think.
Yeah.
And so we got a Blanton's Gold, and
a little less than that actually, and it came with a Fireball.
And it came with a Fireball, and I think we gifted that to a random guy on the street.
If not, we're gonna use it for fuel for a fire.
Yeah,
maybe.
It's like here's your Fireball. Like, look, if Fireball is your gig, knock yourself out.
So be it.
It's not my gig.
So be it.
So, but we got, so from the Blanton's perspective, I think the only thing I'm missing is the Japanese. I mean, I have a straight from the barrel. I have obviously single barrels, and then I have the Gold, and so I think that just leaves the Japanese ones,
right?
And the export ones, and I'm not gonna spend $500 for a bottle of Blanton's.
Right. Now, if there's someone who's looking to get into bourbon, maybe try to get a little bit more serious about it, do you have a bottle that you would recommend to kind of start their collection that maybe is like, obviously something you can find at any store you walk into, something that's not going to break the bank, and something that's got maybe a nice entry proof point?
Yeah, if you want to, I still think in terms of proof that's not going to kill you, that the Henry McKenna Bottled in Bond, which is showing up again on shelves there. We were in, again, keep shouting out Crooks. We were in Crooks yesterday, and they had 8 bottles of it for 60. It might have been 69. I can't remember if it was $65 or $69. And I've started to see that in the Virginia ABC stores, and that was in 2018. That won the San Francisco Gold, and it went from being a middle of the shelf $30 bourbon to gone.
Right.
You couldn't find it. That's a really, really good bourbon. Another one I kind of give a shout out to that I think is really, really good, that is overlooked, and I believe Calumet is an NDP, is a Calumet 8-year-old. It's a nice age. 8-year-old is a really nice aged bourbon. And the Calumet 8 is, I'd have to look up at the MSRP, but I think it's $40 or $45. It's not very expensive. The Calumet 8 is nice. Another thing, if you're looking for things that are good to create out palate, obviously the Knob Creek single barrel, the 9-year is a 9-year bourbon for I think the MSRP is still on that is $35.
It's a great one. Knob 9's a good.
And if you want to go to a really good weeded bourbon to get a little difference in the taste away from the Knob Creek, which is rye forward, is Bardstown. The Bardstown Origin Series weeded is really, really, really good.
Absolutely.
And those are all relatively low-priced bottles. And the Russells, if you can find a Russell single barrel, those aren't going to kill you either. And some of the Calumets, I think you can do a 12. I'm just thinking of stuff that is not really expensive, that a lot of people don't have, that's just not going to kill you, and it's got a pretty good. These are pretty damn good. And if you run into a Four Roses single barrel, and one of the cool things with the Four Roses, you can experiment a little bit when you know the mash bills, what they mean. Do you want to go with the high rye or the lower rye, and you can get an idea whether you like the spice or not and things like that. So
right.
Yeah, and another one that just came to my head that I don't think gets enough love, and it sits on the shelves, is Baker 7.
Yeah.
Baker's 7 is really good, and I think that's still under $60.
For the 7?
Yeah.
It might be a little more than that. I'm actually not sure. We'd have to double check on that.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So for those who don't know and maybe haven't seen on TikTok, they might be wondering, how do you store 500 bottles? What does that look like?
We renovated our house and we had a den, and I found when you live in the middle of nowhere, these guys are you can find these guys that everybody knows in the county or everybody knows in the town. Like if you want something custom built, you get this guy to do it, and he's been doing it forever. So I got this guy named Gary Paris, who's his last job ever. And I just walked I'll never forget, I walk into this barn, essentially a barn, and there's just dust everywhere. He's a cabinet maker. There's just dust everywhere, sawdust on the floor. This guy comes out kind of, I wouldn't say disheveled, but, he's like obviously been working, gray hair, white hair, stuff all over the place. What do you need? And I said, well, I got this wall. It's about this long, this wide. He sketches some stuff out on a piece of paper, and he says, when can I come by and look at it? I give him a day. He comes by. He does some measurements. A couple weeks later, I get a call. I could do it for this many dollars. It's like, and a ladder and this, yeah, boom. And then he came in and just put in the shelves. And I was just gonna store the stuff, like slap it up on the shelves. But the class didn't like that much. Angie didn't care for that much, so she actually. We got some Harvard classics to go along with the professor and put them up there, and we have a smaller shelf that just has glasses on it, and then we kind of arrange it by distillery. And since I've been to most of the distilleries, I have a little Glencairn glasses next to the distillery, so it's sort of a combination storefront kind of boutique store, storage warehouse with, so you don't have to unstack bottles to get to the one you want. You can reach around in the back and get stuff. So it's a beautiful custom made oak library shelf with a ladder that runs across the top. And because I need the ladder because I'm only about 5. I think I say I'm 5'9", but I think the last time I got measured I was 5'8", but I always thought I was 5'9" and a half or something. But
I'll see if I can layer a picture of the library on top of the video where
Yeah,
if anybody hasn't seen it and they're watching, they can kind of get an idea, because it's really beautiful the way you've kind of got it all put together.
And so it's in a room with a little fireplace, 4 leather wingback chairs, a bourbon barrel table that opened up thanks to, I think it's Bourbon Barrel Furniture out of Lexington, Kentucky, and a couple other bourbon barrel side tables. And
it's a bourbon enthusiast dream place to just go and relax and have the fire on and sit and just talk bourbon. It's the best.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough. My wife tolerates this nonsense, and your mother-in-law and my wife tolerates this nonsense,
and my wife's starting to tolerate it, and she's into the whole collecting, so I feel very lucky as well. But now that you've hit 500, do you think that you'll make it to 1,000? And if you were to make it to 1,000, do we have an estimated date? That way, if we ever do get there, we can go, look how wrong you were.
Well, it took me 8 years to get to 500, 7 years to get to 500. So I guess it's possible. The thing is, at this point, I don't know. Is there 500 bourbons that I don't have? Of course there is. I mean, it's coming out all the time, and there's distilleries all over the place, and there's things that are there. But I think we were working it up the other day, right? If I just stopped right now and had 1 pour a day and didn't buy any new bourbon, I think it would, what do we figure? What, 11 years?
I think 11 years.
I think 11 years until it was gone. And that was just based on what I have. And of course, I'm down here and I have
20 more.
20 bottles to, 5. So I'm just over 500 now because there were 15 here, which made it 500. And I guess we can start taking off some of the whiskeys that we have in there that make it look like it's more than it is, because that's 500 bottles in there. That includes a couple of bottles of scotch and some rye and things like that. But
Hey, maybe we'll hit the Sazerac Single Barrel Select lottery, and then
And
you
then-
buy a whole barrel, and we'll
then-
jump 225 bottles
right
in one day.
Stack them up in the corner.
Yeah,
You
so
just-
acting like 1,000's out of reach is definitely not out of reach
Yeah,
yet.
you got a point there.
Yep.
200 bottles in a day.
That's right. Well, I think that's kind of a cool episode to get just a little more in depth about like what's gotten you here to the 500th bottle. You got anything else for us about your collection?
No, I was just gonna say as we wrap it up, and as we get going, I did recently. I did this, and just because of the professor in me and the wanted to learn stuff is the Stave and Thief Society, connected with Moonshine University, which runs a bunch of classes, has a little online class. It's costs $50. They send you a book. You read about the book, about bourbon history, about distilling, tasting notes, a whole bunch of stuff like that. Read all that and take a little quiz. Pass the quiz, and you become a certified bourbon steward, which I just recently completed.
Congratulations.
And so I'm now a certified bourbon steward. And next week, as if I need to, I'm going to Louisville to the one-day class that they're going to walk you through the whole process again, teach you, get a tasting kit, a nosing kit, teach you all the nosing and all that, and then I will become in the Stave and Thief Society, an executive bourbon steward, and I'm hoping it'll end there because I think the next class would cost me like $2,500 to become a master distiller or something.
Let's save that for the bourbon.
Yeah,
Let's save some of that for the bourbon.
Save some of that. So I'm looking forward to that. And so I have 2 trips to Louisville coming up in the next 4 months, 5 months.
There's another
And so
15 bottles
there's
right there.
We're
We're going to be at 1,000 before you know it.
Yeah, you're probably right.
A couple trips to the Bourbon Trail. We always walk away with like 20 bottles each from there. So
Yeah, I haven't been on the Bourbon Trail. I obviously, if I'm going to Louisville for a all-day class on a Friday, I will drive south to Bardstown, and I'll end up in 7 distilleries in Bardstown in no time at all. And going across, I'll probably have to stop at Buffalo Trace and Pepper and maybe Jephthah Creed and all those other ones.
guy math is starting to add up to 1,000 real quick.
Yeah, it is.
Real quick.
Real quick.
Well, I think that's all we got for this episode. I'll see if we've been a little bit rusty. You remember our sign off. What you got?
Class dismissed.
Something before that. Come on.
Until next time, sip some bourbon.
Sip some bourbon. Hey,
Sip some bourbon.
cheers to 500.
Cheers to 500.
Here's to 500 more.
500 more.
Cheers.
Cheers. That shit's really good.
Thinking about you hit 1,000 bottles is insane.
Yeah.